The champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes in a storm, sharp and insistent, each note drilling into my skull. I sat at the edge of the ballroom in my wheelchair, fingers gripping the armrests until my knuckles bleached white. The ivory silk of my engagement dress pooled around my useless legs like a mockery of everything I'd lost 6 months ago. The accident had stolen more than my ability to walk. It had stripped away the illusion that love could survive inconvenience. "Smile, Claire." Marcus's voice cut through the celebration, low and tight with that particular edge I'd learned to recognize. Warning. People are watching. I forced my lips upward, feeling the muscles in my face protest. The Grand Ashford Hotel ballroom swirled with Philadelphia's elite, Marcus's colleagues from the law firm, his college friends who barely acknowledged my existence, distant relatives who'd suddenly materialized when the engagement was announced. None of them were mine. My foster care upbringing hadn't exactly yielded a guest list. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with catered hors d'oeuvres made my stomach turn. Or perhaps that was the way Marcus's hand squeezed my shoulder, his fingers pressing into the bone with just enough pressure to bruise without leaving evidence. "I need some air," I whispered, already knowing the answer. "Later." His smile never reached his eyes as he waved to someone across the room. "Mr. Peterson wants to discuss the partnership." "This is important, Claire. Try to understand that some things matter more than your comfort. 6 months ago, I would have argued. 6 months ago, I'd had legs that worked and a spine that hadn't learned to bend. Now I simply nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of compliance. The wheelchair had become my prison long before the accident that put me in it. Marcus had been attentive at first. Flowers, visits to the rehabilitation center, promises whispered against my hospital gown-clad shoulder, but sympathy has an expiration date, especially when it comes wrapped in inconvenience and medical bills that his upper-middle-class salary could absorb but resented. "I'll get you some water," he said, already walking away, his tailored Tom Ford suit cutting through the crowd like a knife through silk. He didn't ask if I wanted water. He never asked anymore. I sat there, an island of stillness in a sea of motion, watching couples dance to a string quartet that played Vivaldi with mechanical precision. The music felt hollow, each note echoing in the space between what my life was supposed to be and what it had become. "Excuse me, miss." A server appeared at my elbow, young and harried, balancing a tray of champagne that tilted dangerously. "Could you move just a bit? I need to get through to—" The crash came before I could respond. The tray slipped, champagne cascading over the table beside me, soaking the guest book where well-wishers had scrawled their congratulations. The liquid spread like spilled secrets, bleeding ink across carefully written lies about eternal happiness and blessed unions. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The server's face drained of color. "I didn't mean—" "It's fine." I reached for napkins, wheeling closer to help, but my chair caught on the leg of a decorative stand. The vase atop it wobbled, a massive arrangement of white roses and orchids that probably cost more than I used to make in a month as a bookstore clerk. Time slowed. I watched the vase teeter, knowing with horrible certainty what would happen next. My hand shot out uselessly as it fell, crashing against the marble floor with a sound like breaking bones. Water spread across the polished surface, carrying petals and shattered crystal in its wake. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward me. Marcus appeared from the crowd, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Claire, what the hell?" It was an accident. My voice came out smaller than I intended. The server, always an excuse. He grabbed the handles of my wheelchair, jerking it backward with enough force that my teeth clacked together. "Do you have any idea how much that vase cost? How this looks?" "Marcus, please." The words tangled in my throat as he pushed me toward the ballroom's side entrance, away from the staring guests, away from the whispers that had already begun to spread like infection. We burst through a set of double doors into a service corridor, harsh fluorescent lights replacing the soft ambiance of the ballroom. The smell here was different, industrial cleaner, and something vaguely metallic that reminded me of blood. "You're an embarrassment." Marcus spun my chair to face him, crouching down so we were eye level. Up close, I could see the veins pulsing in his neck, the way his perfect features twisted into something ugly. "I try to include you, to make this work despite everything, and you can't even manage to sit still without causing a scene." It wasn't my fault. His hand struck the armrest beside my thigh, the sound explosive in the narrow corridor. I flinched, hating myself for the reaction, hating him more for causing it. "Nothing is ever your fault, is it?" He straightened, pacing in front of me like a lawyer working himself up for closing arguments. "The accident wasn't your fault. The medical bills aren't your fault. The fact that you can't work, can't contribute, can't even function at a simple party, none of it is your fault." Each word landed like a physical blow. I'd heard variations of this speech before, usually late at night when he'd had too much scotch and too little patience. But never here, never surrounded by the trappings of celebration, never with our supposed future hanging in the balance. "I never asked you to stay," I whispered, the truth escaping before I could cage it. His laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. "No, you just made it impossible to leave. Poor Claire, all alone in the world. No family, no friends, nowhere to go. What kind of man would I be if I abandoned you now?" The kind of man who would, I thought but didn't say. The kind of man who already has. "Marcus." I tried again, reaching for him, for some remnant of the person I'd thought I loved. He stepped back, disgust clear on his features. "Don't. Just stay here. I'll make excuses to the guests. Clean up your mess like I always do. Try not to destroy anything else in the next 10 minutes. He turned toward the door, and something inside me cracked. 6 months of swallowing anger, of accepting blame, of making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient. It all crystallized into a moment of desperate clarity. "I won't marry you." The words hung in the air between us, impossibly fragile and impossibly strong. Marcus froze, his hand on the door handle. When he turned back, his expression had shifted into something I'd never seen before, cold calculation mixed with barely leashed rage. "Yes," he said quietly, dangerously. "You will." He moved faster than I could react, grabbing the wheelchair's handles and shoving me backward. My hands scrambled for purchase, finding nothing but air as the chair tilted, as gravity claimed me, as the world inverted in a sickening rush of vertigo and terror. I hit the ground hard, my shoulder taking the brunt of impact against the unforgiving tile. Pain exploded through my body, white-hot and immediate. The wheelchair clattered beside me, one wheel still spinning with a sound like mechanical laughter. "You'll marry me," Marcus repeated, standing over me, his shadow blocking out the harsh fluorescent lights. "Because you have nothing and no one else. Because I'm the only thing standing between you and a state-run facility where they warehouse people like you. Because you need me, Claire, and we both know it." He was right. The knowledge tasted like ash and defeat. My foster care stipend had ended at 18. The bookstore had let me go 2 weeks after the accident. Downsizing, they'd called it, though my replacement started the following Monday. My hospital bills exceeded my entire lifetime earnings. Without Marcus, I had exactly nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I lay there on the cold floor, staring up at the man I'd agreed to marry, and wondered how I'd mistaken control for care, possession for protection. The service door at the far end of the corridor opened. The sound was soft, barely audible, but it shifted something in the air. Marcus's head snapped toward the intrusion, irritation flashing across his face. "This is a private." He stopped mid-sentence, the words dying in his throat. From my position on the floor, I could only see polished black shoes first. Italian leather, the kind that probably cost more than my wheelchair. They moved with deliberate precision, each step measured and purposeful, accompanied by the whisper of expensive fabric and something else. A presence that seemed to compress the very air in the corridor. "Gentlemen," a voice said, smooth as aged whiskey and just as intoxicating. "I think we may have taken a wrong turn." Not gentlemen, plural. I craned my neck, trying to see past Marcus's legs, and caught a glimpse of more shoes, more dark suits, a wall of muscle and menace blocking the corridor like human barricades. Marcus straightened, shifting into his professional persona with practiced ease. "This is a private event. If you're lost, the main ballroom is—" "We're not lost." The owner of that voice stepped forward, And even from my vantage point on the floor, I felt the shift in power dynamics like a change in air pressure before a storm. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and brooding intensity. But it was his eyes that caught me, even at a distance. Dark enough to be black in the fluorescent lighting, they swept the corridor with the kind of awareness that missed nothing. Those eyes found me on the floor. Everything stopped. The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those midnight eyes, a spark of recognition or perhaps calculation. He moved closer, and I caught the scent of him. Cedar and something darker, like gunpowder wrapped in expensive cologne, the kind of scent that warned of danger even as it drew you closer. What happened here? His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath, the kind that didn't ask questions so much as demand answers. Marcus cleared his throat, stepping slightly to block his view of me. A minor accident. My fiancé lost her balance. Nothing to concern yourself with. Lost her balance. The man repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them for lies. His gaze never left me, and I found myself unable to look away. From her wheelchair. And it wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. She gets disoriented sometimes. The medication, you understand. I was just helping her up. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed it myself. Almost. One of the men behind the stranger shifted, and I caught the telltale bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. My heart kicked against my ribs. These weren't wedding guests who'd wandered into the wrong corridor. These were the kind of men who made people disappear, who operated in shadows and left nothing but whispers in their wake. Helping. The dark-haired man crouched down, bringing himself to my level with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. Up close, I could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his suit had been tailored to accommodate weapons I couldn't see but knew were there. Is that what he was doing, Bella? Helping you? The Italian endearment rolled off his tongue like silk over glass. I should have been terrified. Every instinct screamed that this man was dangerous in ways Marcus couldn't begin to comprehend. But lying on that floor, shoulder throbbing, dignity shattered, I found I didn't care. I fell, I whispered, because it was true even if it wasn't the whole truth. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I had the unsettling sensation of being read. Every secret laid bare beneath that penetrating stare. Cadere? Or essere spinto? There's a difference. To fall, or to be pushed. My high school Italian was rusty, but I caught the meaning, and the implication. Who the hell are you? Marcus's voice had risen, losing some of its polished control. This is a private event, and you're trespassing. I'll call security. No. The single word cut through Marcus's bluster like a blade through flesh. The stranger didn't raise his voice, didn't even look at him. His attention remained fixed on me, waiting. One of his men stepped forward, placing a phone in Marcus's hand with deliberate precision. Call them, the bodyguard suggested, his accent thick. Russian, maybe, or Eastern European. See what happens. Marcus looked at the phone, then at the wall of suited men blocking the corridor, and I watched the color drain from his face. Whatever he saw in their expressions made him set the phone down on a nearby supply cart with shaking fingers. I don't want any trouble, Marcus said, and hearing fear in his voice sent a thrill through me that I wasn't proud of. This is just a misunderstanding. Misunderstandings don't leave bruises. The dark-haired man extended his hand to me, palm up, waiting. May I? I stared at that offered hand, broad, scarred across the knuckles, adorned with a single silver ring that caught the light like a promise or a threat. Taking it felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness, trusting that someone would catch me even though I had no reason to believe they would. I placed my hand in his fingers closed around mine, warm and impossibly gentle, and he lifted me as if I weighed nothing. Strong arms slid beneath my shoulders and knees, cradling me against a chest that felt like marble wrapped in cashmere. The world tilted again, but this time it wasn't falling. It was being elevated, being held, being protected by someone who moved with the casual confidence of a man who'd carried broken things before and knew how to keep them from shattering further. Put her down, Marcus demanded, finding some fragment of courage or stupidity. That's my fiancé. You can't just... Can't? The stranger settled me carefully into my wheelchair, adjusting the footrests with surprising familiarity, as if he'd done this before. Then he straightened to his full height, easily 6'2", maybe more, and turned to face Marcus with an expression that made the temperature in the corridor drop 10 degrees. Perhaps you misunderstand your position here, Mr. Reynolds. Marcus Reynolds. My fiancé drew himself up, trying to reclaim authority through posture and pedigree. I'm an attorney with Morrison and Finch. My father is... I know who your father is. The interruption was soft, almost bored. Alexander Reynolds, senior partner, specializes in corporate law. Golfs with Judge Patterson on Thursdays. Owns a summer house in the Hamptons that he purchased for half its value after the previous owner encountered unfortunate legal difficulties. Marcus's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. I watched realization dawn across his features. The understanding that this wasn't a random intrusion, that these men knew things they shouldn't, that power came in forms his law degree hadn't prepared him for. My name is Dante Castellano. He delivered the introduction like a death sentence, each syllable precise and weighted with meaning I didn't fully grasp but felt in my bones. And your event is using a ballroom that sits above one of my business acquisitions. The hotel manager forgot to mention the conflict when he rented the space. Castellano. The name detonated in my mind like a grenade. Even someone as isolated as I'd become knew that name, whispered in news reports that never quite proved anything, referenced in articles about alleged organized crime that carefully avoided direct accusations. The Castellano family didn't just operate in Philadelphia's underworld. They owned it, controlled it, bent it to their will with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. And I was sitting, in front of the man who ran it all. I didn't know, Marcus stammered. The hotel said, "We can move. We can go somewhere else. This doesn't have to be a problem." "No," Dante agreed, his attention shifting back to me. "It doesn't. But it is." He moved closer to my wheelchair, and I caught Marcus tensing in my peripheral vision. Caught the bodyguard shifting to block any potential escape route. The air felt thick with unspoken threats and possibilities. "What's your name?" Dante asked me, as if Marcus didn't exist, as if this were a normal conversation instead of whatever dangerous game we'd stumbled into. "Claire." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Stronger than I expected, clearer. Claire Foster. Foster. He tasted the name, and something flickered across his face too quickly to read. "No family?" "No." "And he..." Dante gestured toward Marcus without looking at him. "Is your choice? Your protection?" The question carried layers I didn't know how to navigate. I thought about Marcus's hands shoving me backward, about months of casual cruelty disguised as concern, about the cage I'd been living in that had nothing to do with my wheelchair, and everything to do with fear and dependency. "I don't have many options," I said finally, honestly. "There are always options, Claire Foster." Dante crouched again, bringing us eye to eye, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. Some are just more dangerous than others. "Mr. Castellano," Marcus tried again, voice pitched with desperation. "Whatever offense I've caused, I apologize. Claire and I will leave immediately. You'll never see us again." "Oh, I'll see you again." Dante stood, turning to face Marcus with deliberate slowness. "Because you're going to come to my office tomorrow morning at 10. You're going to explain to me exactly how a man pushes his disabled fiancée out of her wheelchair and calls it helping. And then you're going to pray I find your explanation satisfactory." "I didn't. She's lying if she said..." The nearest bodyguard moved, just a single step, but it was enough to shut Marcus up mid-sentence. "I'm not lying," I said quietly, surprising myself. "He pushed me. He's been hurting me for months." The words hung in the air, confession and condemnation all at once. I'd said it. After 6 months of silence, of making excuses, of pretending bruises were accidents and cruel words were concern, I'd finally said it out loud. Marcus's face went through several colors, red to white to something approaching gray. "Claire, don't do this. You don't know what you're saying. The medication makes her disoriented." Dante's voice could have frozen hell. "You mentioned that. Tell me, Mr. Reynolds, What medication is she taking that causes bruises in the shape of fingerprints? I looked down at my arms, at the marks I'd learned to hide with long sleeves and careful positioning. Under the harsh corridor lighting, they were impossible to miss. 5 distinct circles on my upper arm where Marcus had grabbed me 3 days ago during an argument about wedding vendors. "This is none of your business," Marcus said. But the fight had gone out of his voice. "What happens between Claire and me is private. You can't just... I can do whatever I want." Dante's tone remained conversational, which somehow made the threat more terrifying. "That's the benefit of being who I am, Mr. Reynolds. The rules that govern you don't apply to me." He turned back to me, and his expression softened in a way that should have been impossible for someone who radiated such predatory danger. "Do you want to leave with him?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Leaving Marcus meant losing the apartment he paid for, the health insurance that covered my physical therapy, the stability that came with having someone, anyone, to depend on. It meant going back to state assistance and charity care, to waiting lists for accessible housing, and the slow, grinding poverty I'd escaped when he proposed. But staying meant more nights like this one, more bruises disguised as accidents, more of myself eroded away until nothing remained but compliance and fear. My throat closed around the words. I don't know where I'd go. Something passed between Dante and one of his men, some silent communication I couldn't interpret. Then he was pulling out his phone, typing rapidly with thumbs that moved with surprising dexterity. "Luca," he said into the device, his accent thickening slightly. "The penthouse at the Meridian. I need it prepared for a guest. Medical equipment. Wheelchair accessible. Hospital bed if necessary. Doctor on call." He paused, listening. "No. Tonight. Now." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, all without breaking eye contact with me. "You have somewhere to go now," he said simply. "The question remains, do you want to?" I stared at Dante Castellano, this stranger who held my future in his scarred hands, and tried to understand what was happening. Men like him didn't rescue women like me. They didn't offer penthouse apartments and medical care to broken girls they'd found on corridor floors. There had to be a price, some hidden cost that would come due when I least expected it. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why would you help me?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment, something raw flickered across his features. Pain or memory or some combination of both. Because no one helped her. Her. Not me. Someone else. Someone whose ghost still haunted those dark eyes. "This is insane." Marcus found his voice again, though it shook at the edges. "Claire, think about what you're doing. You don't know this man. He's a criminal, for God's sake. You're going to trust him over me? You pushed me out of my wheelchair," I said, each word crystallizing into certainty. "So yes, I'm going to trust him over you." Dante's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Smart girl." He glanced at his men. "Marco, bring the car around. Make sure it's the Escalade. More room for the wheelchair. Wait." I gripped the armrests, reality crashing over me in cold waves. My things. Everything I own is at Marcus's apartment. "Not anymore, it isn't." Marcus's voice dripped venom. "You walk out that door with him, you get nothing. No clothes, no personal items, nothing. See how far his charity extends when you're completely dependent on him." The cruelty was calculated, designed to remind me of my powerlessness, and it worked. Everything I had, my laptop with the novel I'd been writing before the accident, my mother's necklace from the group home, the few photographs I'd managed to keep through years of foster placements, all of it sat in drawers and closets in an apartment I'd never legally lived in. Address. Dante pulled out his phone again, fingers poised over the screen. "What?" "His address. Give it to me." "You can't just break into my home," Marcus sputtered. "I'll call the police, You'll do nothing." Dante didn't even look at him, because if you call anyone, if you make this difficult, I'll have a very thorough conversation with the partners at Morrison and Finch about your creative billing practices. The ones where you charge clients for hours you spend at your mistress's apartment in Society Hill. Marcus went white. "How do you—" "I know everything, Mr. Reynolds. That's what makes me dangerous." Dante's attention returned to me, expectant. "The address, Claire. I rattled it off, watching Marcus's face crumble with each number and street name. Dante typed rapidly, sent the message, then pocketed his phone. "Your belongings will be at the Meridian within 2 hours," he said. "All of them." "Is there anything else you need from him?" I looked at Marcus. Really looked at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The handsome face that had smiled at me across coffee shop tables. The hands that had held mine through hospital stays before they'd learned to hurt. The man I'd thought would save me from loneliness, only to trap me in something worse, the ring. I twisted the engagement band off my finger, the 2-carat diamond catching the light one final time. It had always been too big, sliding around my knuckle, another thing that didn't quite fit. "He can have it back." I held it out, and after a moment's hesitation, Dante took it. He examined the ring briefly, then tossed it to Marcus, who fumbled the catch. It bounced off his palm and clattered to the floor, rolling to a stop near the overturned wheelchair. "Congratulations, Mr. Reynolds," Dante said. "You just became a single man. I suggest you celebrate quietly and stay far away from Claire Foster. Because if I hear you've contacted her, harassed her, or so much as breathed in her direction..." He let the sentence hang, unfinished and all the more menacing for it. "You can't do this," Marcus whispered, but there was no conviction behind the words. He knew, as we all did, that Dante Castellano could do exactly this, and far worse. The bodyguard named Marco appeared in the corridor entrance. "Car's ready, boss." Dante moved behind my wheelchair without asking permission, his hands settling on the handles with surprising gentleness. "Then let's go." "Wait." I twisted to look up at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I need to know. What do you want from me? What's the price for all this?" He leaned down, bringing his mouth close to my ear, and I felt the warmth of his breath against my skin. "Right now, just to get you somewhere safe. The rest..." He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice even if I couldn't see it. "We'll negotiate later, Bella." Then he was pushing me down the corridor, away from Marcus, away from the ballroom where strangers still celebrated a wedding that would never happen, away from the life I'd known, however broken it had been, and into something completely unknown. The service elevator was large enough to accommodate my wheelchair and all of Dante's men. We descended in silence, the only sound the mechanical whir of the lift and my own racing pulse. I kept my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling, acutely aware of Dante standing behind me, his presence a solid wall of controlled danger. We emerged into an underground parking garage. The Escalade waited near the elevator, black and gleaming, its windows tinted so dark they seemed to swallow light. Marco held the door open while another guard produced a ramp from the vehicle's rear. "I can transfer myself," I said, needing some small assertion of independence. "I know you can." Dante crouched beside me again, and I was starting to recognize this as his preferred position when speaking to me. Equal eye level, no towering over, but you don't have to. Not tonight. Before I could protest, he'd scooped me up again, cradling me against his chest as he carried me to the SUV. This close, I could feel his heartbeat through the expensive fabric of his suit, steady, unhurried, completely calm. As if kidnapping women from engagement parties was just another Tuesday evening. He settled me into the back seat with care that seemed at odds with everything I knew about men like him. One of his guards folded my wheelchair and loaded it into the rear while Dante slid in beside me, maintaining a careful distance that somehow felt more intimate than touching. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing us into leather-scented darkness. Marco took the driver's seat, another guard riding shotgun, and we pulled out of the garage into Philadelphia's night-bright streets. I watched the city slide past the tinted windows, familiar landmarks rendered strange by circumstance and fear, and the intoxicating scent of the man beside me. We were heading toward Center City, toward the luxury high-rises that pierced the skyline like glass needles. "The Meridian is one of yours?" I asked, breaking the silence. "Everything is mine, in one way or another." Dante's voice came from the shadows, rich and dark as aged wine. "The hotel, the restaurants, the shipping companies, even some things that pretend to be legitimate. And you're just giving me a place there? I'm loaning you a place there until you decide what comes next." I turned to look at him, trying to read his expression in the passing streetlights. What if I decide to leave, to go somewhere else? Then you leave. He met my gaze steadily. I'm not your fiancé, Claire. I don't keep things that want to be free, just the things that don't. The question came out sharper than intended. His smile was brief, humorless. Especially those. We drove in silence for several blocks. My mind spun with questions I didn't know how to ask, implications I wasn't ready to examine. This man had just upended my entire life with the casual efficiency of someone moving chess pieces. And I'd let him. More than that. I'd wanted him to. The woman you mentioned, I said quietly. The one nobody helped. Who was she? Dante's expression shuddered immediately, walls slamming down behind his eyes. Someone who mattered. And I remind you of her? No. The word came fast, almost harsh. You're nothing like her. She was... He stopped, jaw working as if chewing on words too bitter to swallow. She was my sister, and she died because I wasn't there to protect her. The confession hung between us, raw and painful. I understood then, in a flash of terrible clarity, why he'd intervened. This wasn't about me at all. It was about the ghost of a girl he couldn't save, about absolution sought through a stranger's rescue. I'm sorry, I whispered. Because what else could I say? Don't be. His voice had gone cold, distant. It was a long time ago. I was 17, stupid, thought I could leave the family business behind and pretend to be normal, while I was at college trying to be someone I wasn't. She was here, trapped in a marriage our father arranged. Her husband was progressive in his cruelty. The pieces clicked together. He hurt her. He destroyed her. Dante's hands clenched into fists on his thighs. By the time I came home, by the time I understood what was happening, it was too late. She learned to accept it, to believe she deserved it. And one night, when he went too far, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That's why you took over, I said, understanding dawning. That's why you're here instead of being a doctor, yes. The bitterness in his laugh could have stripped paint. I was in medical school when she died. Had this whole future planned out. Surgery, research, saving lives. But some lives can't be saved by medicine. They need different kinds of intervention. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined street, where buildings stretched toward the sky like monuments to wealth and power. The Meridian rose before us, all glass and steel and modern luxury that seemed designed to intimidate. So you became this instead, I said. The man who saves people like her. Like me. I became the man who makes sure men like your fiancé understand there are consequences. Dante's eyes found mine in the darkness, and they were absolutely merciless. Marcus Reynolds will never hurt another woman. I'll make certain of that. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with cold. What are you going to do to him? Nothing permanent. Unless he makes it necessary. He said it so casually, as if discussing weather instead of violence. But he'll carry the memory of our conversation for the rest of his life. They always do. The car pulled into the Meridian's underground parking, gliding past spaces marked for regular residents into a private section guarded by security gates and cameras. We stopped near a dedicated elevator, its doors already open and waiting. Marco opened our door, and Dante exited first, then turned to lift me out with that same careful precision. My wheelchair appeared as if summoned, and he placed me in it, adjusting the footrests again with hands that seemed too gentle for someone capable of the threats he'd just made. The elevator ride to the penthouse was swift and silent. When the doors opened, I wasn't prepared for what waited beyond them. The penthouse stretched before me like something from a magazine spread I'd never be able to afford. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Philadelphia's glittering skyline, the city spread out like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The space itself was modern minimalism executed with brutal elegance. Dark hardwood floors, white leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses. But what caught my attention, what made my breath hitch, was how thoroughly it had been transformed in the hour since Dante's phone call. A hospital-grade adjustable bed occupied one corner of the massive master bedroom, visible through open double doors. Grab bars had been installed in the bathroom. I could see them gleaming chrome through another doorway. A raised toilet seat, a shower chair, all the medical equipment I needed but had been too proud to ask Marcus to provide. Someone had even placed a vase of white orchids on the nightstand, their scent delicate and clean. "How?" I whispered, wheeling myself slowly into the space. "How did you do all this so fast?" Money and fear are excellent motivators. Dante moved past me, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. Beneath it, his shoulder holster was visible, black leather cradling a weapon that looked well used. He caught me staring and smiled slightly. "Does it frighten you, the gun?" "No." And surprisingly, it didn't. What frightened me was how safe I felt despite it. Because of it. Protected by the same violence that should have sent me running. Should it? Probably. He unbuckled the holster, laying it carefully on a side table within easy reach. The gesture was casual, practiced. The movements of someone who'd been armed so long he felt naked without steel against his ribs. "But you're not like most people, are you, Claire Foster?" I didn't know how to answer that, so I wheeled toward the windows instead, drawn by the view. From this height, the city looked peaceful, orderly, nothing like the chaos churning inside me. Behind my reflection in the glass, I could see Dante watching me, his dark eyes tracking every movement. "Your things should arrive within the hour," he said, rolling up his sleeves to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars, small nicks and longer slashes that spoke of a life lived dangerously. "Luca is thorough. He'll get everything. Even the things I didn't know I needed back." The question came out before I could stop it. "Especially those." Dante moved closer, his reflection joining mine in the window. We stood like that, him behind me, separated by my chair but connected by the glass image of us together. "Tell me about the novel," I startled. "How did you—" "You mentioned a laptop with writing. I'm curious what stories someone like you would tell. Someone like you. Broken, dependent, trapped. But also survivor, fighter, strong enough to leave when it mattered most. It's about a girl who thinks she's being saved, but is actually being captured," I said, watching his reflection for reaction. "And a man who thinks he's protecting her, but is really just keeping her caged." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Sounds autobiographical. It was supposed to be fiction." I turned my chair to face him properly. Tired of reading expressions in glass, before tonight anyway. And now? He crouched. Of course he crouched, bringing himself to my level like he always did. Like kneeling before me was natural instead of the submission it appeared to be. Now I don't know what it is. The honesty felt dangerous, like exposing a wound to someone who might press on it just to watch me bleed. "I don't know what any of this is. This," Dante said, his voice dropping to something lower, rougher, "is me making sure you're safe. That's all it needs to be tonight. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we talk about what you want, what you need, how we can help each other." There it was. The transaction I'd been waiting for. "So there is a price. There's always a price, Bella." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were warm against my skin, calloused in ways that suggested violence and gentleness in equal measure. "But it's not what you think. I don't want your body or your gratitude. I want something much more valuable." My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "What?" "Information." He stood, putting distance between us again, and moved to the bar cart by the window. Crystal decanters caught the light, filled with amber liquids that promised numbness and forgetting. "Your ex-fiancé works for Morrison and Finch. They represent several of my competitors, people who would very much like to see me removed from power. I need to know what Marcus knows, what he's heard, what cases he's working on that might impact my interests." The request was so matter-of-fact, so businesslike, that it took me a moment to process. "You want me to spy on him? I want you to remember conversations, meetings, details you might have overheard." Dante poured 2 fingers of scotch, neat, and took a slow sip. "Marcus struck me as the type who brings work home, who talks about cases over dinner to prove how important he is. Am I wrong?" He wasn't. Marcus had filled our evenings with legal jargon and client gossip, never noticing that I actually listened, that I remembered. He'd treated me like furniture, present but unimportant, there to nod and agree but never to truly hear. "And in exchange?" I asked. For this information? In exchange, you stay here as long as you need. Medical care, physical therapy, anything that helps you heal. Plus a salary. Let's say $5,000 a month to start. More if the information proves valuable. $5,000. More money than I'd ever made in my life. Offered like it was pocket change. The practical part of my brain, the part that had learned to survive through calculation rather than hope, knew I should take it. Should grab this lifeline and hold on with both hands. But another part, smaller and more damaged, whispered warnings. That nothing came free. That men like Dante Castellano didn't rescue broken girls out of kindness. That I was trading one cage for another, however gilded the bars might be. I need to think about it, I said finally. Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Fair enough. Take the night. We'll talk in the morning. A knock at the door interrupted whatever else he might have said. Marco entered carrying a large duffel bag, followed by two other men hauling boxes I recognized from Marcus's apartment. Everything you specified, boss, Marco said, setting the bag down carefully. Plus some extra items we thought Miss Foster might need. I watched them unload my life. The worn laptop case, the cardboard box with my mother's necklace, and childhood photos. Clothes that suddenly seemed shabby in this pristine space. They worked with quiet efficiency, placing everything in the bedroom, giving me privacy to sort through it later. When they finished, Dante walked them to the door, speaking in rapid Italian too low for me to catch. I heard my name mixed with other words. Proteggere, sicurezza, sempre, protect, security, always. Then they were gone, and it was just the two of us in the vast penthouse, the silence somehow louder than conversation. You should rest, Dante said, but made no move toward the door himself. It's been a long night. Are you staying? The question came out more vulnerable than I intended. Would you like me to? I should have said no. Should have insisted on space and boundaries and all the things that kept strangers separate. Instead, I found myself nodding. Dante's smile was small but genuine. Then I'll be in the guest room. If you need anything, why are you really doing this? I interrupted, desperate to understand. And don't tell me it's just about your sister or information from Marcus. There's something else. I can feel it. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the city he controlled like a king surveying his kingdom. 6 months ago, he said finally, I watched surveillance footage of a car accident. A sedan ran a red light and T-boned a Honda Civic at an intersection downtown. The woman driving the Civic survived but lost the use of her legs. The sedan driver was drunk, connected, wealthy. He walked away with a fine and suspended license. Ice flooded my veins. That was me. That was my accident. Yes. He turned to face me, and his expression was carefully blank. The sedan driver was Judge Patterson's nephew, the same judge who golfs with Marcus's father, the same judge who's been blocking several of my legitimate business ventures out of personal vendetta. The room tilted. You've been watching me since the accident? I've been watching Patterson's nephew since he killed my sister's best friend in a similar accident 3 years ago. When he did it again, when he hurt you and walked away unpunished, I decided it was time for a different kind of justice. So this isn't about saving me at all. The words tasted like ash. This is about revenge. It's about both. Dante crossed the space between us in 3 strides, kneeling beside my wheelchair with an intensity that stole my breath. Yes. I've been monitoring the situation, yes. I knew who you were before tonight, but I didn't plan for Marcus to be exactly the kind of man I despise most. Didn't plan to find you on that floor, hurt and alone, making the same choice my sister could never make. His hand found mine, fingers threading through mine with surprising tenderness. I'm not a good man, Claire. I've done things that would horrify you, hurt people who probably deserved it and some who didn't. But I protect what's mine, and the moment I picked you up off that floor, you became mine to protect. I'm not yours, I whispered, but there was no conviction behind it. Not yet. His thumb traced circles on my palm, the gesture hypnotic, soothing, but you will be. because I'm going to give you everything he never did. Safety, respect, the freedom to choose. And when you realize that protection doesn't have to be a prison, when you understand that being mine means being valued instead of controlled, you'll come to me willingly. That sounds like another kind of cage. Then leave. He released my hand, standing abruptly. The door isn't locked. You can call anyone, go anywhere. I won't stop you. I stared at him, at this beautiful, dangerous man who'd turned my world inside out in the span of a few hours. He was right. The door wasn't locked. I could leave, could find a shelter or call social services, or somehow crawl back to the life I'd known before tonight. But I didn't move. That's what I thought, Dante said softly, reading my stillness for the answer it was. Get some rest, Claire. Tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next. He left me there by the window, disappearing into the guest room and closing the door with a soft click. I sat alone in the penthouse's vast silence, surrounded by luxury I hadn't earned and protected by violence I didn't understand, and wondered if I'd just escaped one trap, only to walk willingly into another. Outside the window, the city glittered like broken promises and new beginnings all at once. Block 05. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that I wasn't in Marcus's apartment. The events of the previous night crashed over me. The engagement party, the fall, Dante Castellano's dark eyes promising protection and danger in equal measure. I'd fallen asleep in my wheelchair, too exhausted and overwhelmed to transfer to the hospital bed, and sometime during the night someone had covered me with a cashmere blanket soft enough to be sinful. The penthouse was silent except for the distant hum of the city below. I transferred myself to the wheelchair and made my way through the space, half expecting to find it empty, to discover the previous night had been some fever dream born of desperation and champagne. But Dante was there. He stood in the kitchen, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to his elbows, making espresso with the focused precision of someone who'd learned the ritual young. His hair was still damp from a shower, and without the suit jacket and weapons, he looked almost normal. Almost. Good morning, Bella. He glanced up, and even in daylight, those dark eyes held the same intensity. Coffee? Please. My voice came out rough with sleep and nerves. He prepared a cappuccino with practiced ease, the machine hissing and steaming, and brought it to the breakfast bar where I'd positioned myself. The cup was delicate porcelain, painted with tiny flowers, completely at odds with the masculine minimalism of the rest of the penthouse. They were my mother's, Dante said, catching my examination of the cup. One of the few things I kept when she died. I took a sip. Perfect temperature, perfect foam, the kind of coffee that probably cost $20 in the cafes I used to walk past but never enter. She had good taste. She had expensive taste. There's a difference. He leaned against the counter, cradling his own cup, watching me with that unnerving focus that made me feel simultaneously exposed and protected. Did you sleep? Eventually. I wrapped my hands around the warm porcelain, needing something to hold. I kept thinking about what you said, about your sister, about the accident, about all of it. And I have questions. Ask them. He took a slow sip of espresso, waiting. I gathered my courage, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Judge Patterson's nephew, the man who hit me. What happened to him? Something cold and satisfied flickered across Dante's features. He had an unfortunate accident of his own 3 months ago, drove off a bridge near his family's estate in the Hamptons. Tragic loss. The investigation concluded he was intoxicated at the time. Was he? Does it matter? Dante's voice remained neutral, but his eyes were absolutely merciless. He took something from you that can never be returned. He killed my sister's friend and faced no consequences. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms, Claire. I should have been horrified, should have recognized the confession for what it was. Admission of murder, or at least orchestrated revenge. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction bloom in my chest. Terrible and sweet. Good, I whispered, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Dante's smile was slow and approving. There she is, the woman who's been hiding underneath all that learned helplessness. I'm not helpless. I know. He set down his cup and moved closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with espresso and something uniquely him. That's why Marcus worked so hard to convince you otherwise. Helpless women are easier to control. But you're not helpless, Claire. You're angry, and anger, properly directed, is the most powerful weapon there is. A knock at the door interrupted whatever I might have said. Dante's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, shoulders squaring, expression hardening, hand moving automatically toward where his gun would be if he were wearing it. He crossed to a side table and retrieved the weapon, checking it with practiced efficiency before approaching the door. "Who is it?" His voice carried absolute authority. "Luca, boss. I have the doctor." Dante's posture relaxed fractionally. He opened the door to reveal a thin man in his 50s carrying a medical bag, flanked by Luca, one of the bodyguards from the previous night. "Dr. Ricci," Dante said, stepping aside to let them enter. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." The doctor's eyes found me immediately, professional assessment replacing polite greeting. "Miss Foster, I'm Dr. Ricci. Mr. Castellano asked me to conduct a full examination and review your medical history. With your permission, of course." I glanced at Dante, who'd retreated to give us space but remained close enough to hear everything. "Why?" "Because Marcus Reynolds chose your doctors," Dante said. "And I don't trust his judgment about anything concerning your welfare. Doctor Ricci is the best rehabilitation specialist on the East Coast. He's going to give me a second opinion." "I can speak for myself," Dr. Ricci interjected mildly, setting his bag on the coffee table. "But he's not wrong about my credentials. I've reviewed the reports from your accident, Miss Foster. Your initial treatment was competent, but there are some concerns I'd like to address." For the next hour, Dr. Ricci conducted the most thorough examination I'd experienced since waking up in the hospital 6 months ago. He tested reflexes, checked sensation, asked detailed questions about pain levels and functionality. Dante disappeared into his office during most of it, giving us privacy, but I could feel his presence like a weight in the adjacent room. Finally, Dr. Ricci sat back, making notes in a leather journal. "Your prognosis was overly pessimistic," he said without preamble. "The initial diagnosis classified your injury as complete paralysis of both legs, but based on what I'm seeing, retained sensation in your thighs, some motor response in your right leg, this appears to be incomplete spinal cord injury, possibly ASIA C or D classification." The medical terminology meant nothing to me, but the hope in his voice was unmistakable. "What does that mean?" "It means you may regain some function with proper therapy." He looked up from his notes, expression serious, but not unkind. "I'm not promising you'll walk again, Miss Foster, but there's a possibility, a real one, that with intensive rehabilitation, you could regain enough muscle control for standing, perhaps even assisted walking with braces or a walker." The words hit me like physical blows. 6 months. 6 months of Marcus telling me this was forever, that I needed to accept my limitations, that hoping for improvement was setting myself up for disappointment, and now this stranger was saying that hope had been stolen from me along with everything else. Why didn't my other doctors tell me this? My voice shook with suppressed rage. Dr. Ricci's expression grew uncomfortable. "I can't speak to their reasoning, but I will say that incomplete spinal injuries are often misdiagnosed initially, especially if follow-up care is inadequate." "Her physical therapy was twice a week at a county clinic," Dante said from the doorway, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. 15-minute sessions with overworked therapists who had 30 other patients to see. That would explain it. Dr. Ricci closed his journal. "Miss Foster, if you're willing, I'd like to arrange intensive therapy. Daily sessions, aquatic therapy, electrical stimulation, everything we can throw at this. No guarantees, but I believe we can improve your quality of life significantly." I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. Could only nod, while tears I'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. Dr. Ricci stood, gathering his things. "I'll arrange everything and have a detailed plan to you by tomorrow. Mr. Castellano has my contact information if you have questions." He paused at the door, meeting my eyes with surprising gentleness. "You've been failed by a lot of people, Miss Foster. Let's make sure that stops today." After he left, Dante approached slowly, crouching beside my wheelchair like he always did. He didn't speak, didn't offer platitudes or false comfort. Just pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, actual cloth, monogrammed with his initials, and handed it to me. He knew? I said, when I could finally form words. Marcus knew there was a chance I could improve, and he kept me dependent anyway. Yes. Dante's voice was granite hard. He did. I want him to pay. The words came out fierce, feral. Nothing like the quiet, compliant woman I'd been learning to become. Not just for pushing me, for all of it. For stealing hope and calling it love. Then he will. Dante's hand found mine, fingers intertwining with a possessiveness that should have frightened me but instead felt like an anchor. But first, we get you strong. We get you better. And then when you're ready, we make him understand exactly what he threw away. Over the next 3 weeks, my life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Dr. Ricci's therapy was brutal. Hours in the pool, electrodes stimulating muscles that had forgotten how to fire, exercises that left me shaking and exhausted. But slowly, impossibly, I began to feel things I'd thought were lost forever. A twitch in my right thigh, the ability to shift my weight independently, tiny victories that felt like miracles. Dante was there for all of it, a constant presence that oscillated between protective and possessive. He worked from the penthouse most days, conducting business in rapid Italian while I went through therapy in the converted second bedroom. At night, we'd have dinner together, meals prepared by a private chef and eaten at the breakfast bar while we talked about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in the shadow of his father's empire, about the weight of expectations and blood. I told him about foster homes and survival, about learning to make yourself small enough to avoid notice. We were both products of violence in different ways, shaped by loss into something harder than we'd started out. And somewhere in those weeks, the careful distance between us began to collapse. It started small, his hand on my shoulder during particularly difficult therapy sessions, my fingers brushing his when he handed me water. Then larger, him carrying me to bed when I fell asleep working on my novel, me reaching for him in the darkness when nightmares about Marcus came calling. "This is dangerous," I told him one night, 3 weeks after moving in. We were on the balcony, the city spread below us, and his arm was around my shoulders against the autumn chill. "I know," he said simply. "You're a criminal. You've killed people. You're using me for information about your enemies." Yes to all of that. He turned me to face him, hands gentle on my arms. "But I've also never lied to you, never hurt you, never made you feel less than what you are." Can Marcus say the same? He couldn't. And we both knew it. "I'm falling for you," I whispered. The confession terrifying and liberating all at once. "And I don't know if it's real or if it's just because you saved me. Does it matter?" Dante's thumb traced my cheekbone, the gesture achingly tender. "I'm falling for you too, Claire. Have been since I watched you leave Marcus standing in that corridor. Since you chose uncertainty over safety, freedom over comfort. You're the strongest person I know, and you don't even realize it yet." He kissed me then, soft and careful, asking permission with every movement. And I kissed him back, pouring 6 months of suppressed anger and newfound hope into the connection between us. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "About Marcus." Dread pooled in my stomach. "What about him?" "He's been asking questions, trying to find out where you are, who you're with. My people have kept him at bay, but he's persistent and stupid. He doesn't understand that some things, once you lose them, you can never get back." "What are you going to do?" Dante's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "I'm going to give him a choice. He can walk away cleanly, disappear from Philadelphia and never look back. Or he can keep pushing, and I'll make him disappear in a way that's much less pleasant. And if he chooses to push, then I'll handle it." His eyes met mine, dark and absolutely certain. "You're mine now, Claire. Mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to love. And I don't share what's mine." The possessiveness should have terrified me, should have reminded me of Marcus's controlling nature, of cages disguised as care. But Dante's possession felt different, not diminishing but elevating, not trapping but freeing. He wanted me stronger, not weaker. wanted me to choose him every day, instead of having no choice at all. Yours, I agreed, testing the word. It fit better than I expected. 2 months after that night in the corridor, I stood for the first time. It was barely standing, more like trembling upright between parallel bars, while Dr. Ricci and Dante hovered close enough to catch me if I fell. My legs shook violently, muscles screaming in protest, sweat pouring down my face from the effort, but I was standing, supporting my own weight, defying every doctor who'd told me this was impossible. 10 seconds, Dr. Ricci counted. 15. 20. Excellent, Claire. You can sit now. But I didn't sit. I looked at Dante, at the pride and something deeper shining in his eyes, and I held on for 30 seconds. 40. 50. When I finally sank back into the wheelchair, Dante was there immediately, pulling me against his chest, his heart hammering as hard as mine. You did it, he whispered against my hair. I knew you would. I had the right motivation, I said, pulling back to meet his eyes. The right person believing in me. That night, he proposed. Not with champagne and public spectacle like Marcus had. Instead, over dinner in the penthouse, he simply pulled out a ring, platinum band with a single emerald the exact color of my eyes, and set it on the table between us. I don't expect an answer now, he said quietly, or even soon, but I want you to know my intentions, Claire. I want you as my wife, not because you need me, but because I need you, not to control or possess, but to love and protect and build something with. Something real. I stared at the ring, at this offering from a man who'd given me back my hope and my strength, and my belief that love didn't have to hurt. Yes, I said, and watched his expression transform from careful control to unguarded joy. Yes? Yes. I picked up the ring, sliding it onto my finger where it fit perfectly. No slipping, no adjustment needed. I choose you, Dante Castellano. I choose this life, this love, this danger. All of it. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, a promise and a vow all at once. 6 months later, I walked down the aisle, not without assistance. I used forearm crutches and Dante's arm for balance, and every step was deliberate and hard-won. But I walked, in a dress I'd chosen myself, toward a man who'd seen me broken and helped me rebuild into something stronger. The wedding was small, just Dante's inner circle and the few friends I'd made through therapy. No champagne towers to knock over. No public spectacles to navigate, just honest vows spoken in a private chapel, promising to love and protect and choose each other every single day. As Dante slid the wedding band onto my finger, I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, helpless, trapped, unable to imagine a future beyond survival. That girl had died on a corridor floor, and in her place stood someone new, someone forged in pain and tempered by love. Someone who understood that protection and possession were only cages if you weren't given the key. Dante had given me the key, and every day I chose to stay. I love you, he whispered as we were pronounced husband and wife. I love you too, I replied, and meant it with every rebuilt piece of my heart. We left the chapel to a future uncertain and dangerous and absolutely ours, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever darkness waited, we'd face it together. The broken girl who learned to stand, and the dangerous man who'd knelt beside her wheelchair and offered not salvation, but partnership. That night, in the penthouse that had become home, Dante carried me to bed one last time. Tomorrow, he said, settling beside me, pulling me close. You walk on your own. Tomorrow, I agreed, already drifting toward sleep in the arms of the man who'd saved me by teaching me to save myself. Outside the window, Philadelphia glittered like a promise kept in a future unfolding. And in the darkness of our bedroom, surrounded by love hard-won and freely given, I finally understood what it meant to be truly free. The cage had never been the wheelchair. It had been the belief that I needed